culture, I think, is probably fundamentally, it's probably one of the most important things in a business, but a restaurant definitely. It's not just one person. It's not just me running the show here. It's not, restaurants. It's really about the amalgamation of the staff and the passion and everything that sort of goes into it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. There are all kinds of restaurants for all occasions, experiences, cuisines, and at different price points too. But how do you create a truly unique offering at the pointy end? Free from some of the trappings of finer dining, but expressing a sense of place, wonder, and of course, keeping the magic on the plate too. Clinton Mciver is the executive chef of Amaru and Auterra Wine Bar in Armadale, Victoria. Clinton, how are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to have you on the show. You've created, one of the real standout establishments in the new wave of sort of contemporary dining in Australia. What's it been like being part of that sort of new wave?
I don't know. It's been, we've been trading for just over 6 years now, and I guess 2 of those being in COVID. It's sort of it feels like it's kind of been an eternity, but it's also flown by in the same sense as well. It's been good. It's been a journey, I guess, from when we first opened. We just kind of really had the vision in mind that we wanted to be just a really, really good neighborhood restaurant. And I guess taking some inspiration from some of the sort of bigger cities around the world. You don't really have to go into the city to have a world-class sort of dine-in experience. And we wanted something that was still accessible, probably a little bit different than your average sort of midweek neighborhood restaurant as well in that sense. And we've just kind of continued to sort of grow and evolve from that sort of platform.
What were the challenges in the early days of creating this amazing establishment that you've created, but away from the big cities?
Look, where we are in Armadale, I remember, we were looking for a site, and we wanted to be in a neighborhood or a surrounding neighborhood that was, I guess, reasonably sort of affluent, where there would be sort of an audience, and somewhere where there would sort of be a continual sort of custom for what we wanted to sort of deliver. It took us probably a good 18 months to 2 years to really sort of start to really find our feet, I think. We took the restaurant on. I took the restaurant on sort of by myself. And look, it's always been a work in progress in many ways as well. We started from a very, very small budget. I had a little bit of money that I had saved, and then I essentially had a loan from some very good family friends of mine, which was quite small when you start sort of adding up the cost of starting the restaurant from scratch and fitting out and creating the concept. Look, the first 2 years, they were really hard. I think, it's a competitive market, definitely. And I think, when you want to sort of be a player in the sort of the bigger cities in Australia, there's it's always going to be a challenge. But I guess we always kind of, sort of stuck to our guns for what we wanted to do and deliver. And that continued to sort of evolve and grow. And, we've continued to sort of, I guess, articulate the experience that we want to offer along the way. The first year, look, realistically, we could have closed almost every single month. It was so inconsistent. It was really, really hard from a financial point of view. But look, it was also exciting as well. I love a challenge, And I didn't think it was going to be easy. I don't know if I thought it was going to be as hard as it was. But look, in saying that, I'm a big believer of, you sort of, the culture that you build and what you sort of believe in and what you do day in, day out, you'll eventually sort of attract the right people around you as well. And then you'll really start to sort of attract the right audience. When we first started, it was like sort of three of us in the kitchen, a couple of casual staff. And look, we were at a fairly sort of moderate price point. I guess being a restaurant that only offers a sort of set menu, sometimes it can be a little bit limiting as well. But again, that's sort of the model and what we sort of set out to do has kind of always sort of dictated our journey and our story as well. And we've been very fortunate that, I guess, from those early days as well, we really did start to sort of build a loyal following. And it just took a bit of time, we stuck it out. We attracted sort of more staff. We attracted more custom. We started attracting, some really good sort of reviews and some press and some write-ups. And then once you sort of get to that point, it's kind of just starts to sort of snowball on from there. And it's been good. It's been a great challenge, actually. Been really rewarding.
Is the restaurant different to your initial ideas when you were starting out to sort of what it's evolved to become?
No, it has, yeah, definitely. I think I was really, really adamant that we wanted to, of course, we wanted to have a nice restaurant. We always wanted it to be small. I mean, we've only got 34 seats and we've never added any more seats in. We've always wanted it to be fairly sort of personal. And we've always wanted it to be a fairly sort of intimate experience. But I guess, over the years, and again, just with the sort of the growth of the business, we've continually been able to sort of build our offering and increase the sort of size of the menu. We've been able to sort of afford more staff and afford better staff and really just sort of start to build the business from there.
I want to explore what you've achieved there, but take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family?
Not a great deal, to be completely honest. Not a great deal at all. I'm the oldest of six boys, so I come from Queensland, and we never really ate out at all. I don't think we ever really went to any restaurants. And the food in my household was always fairly plain. We come from a fairly modest upbringing. So we don't come from a strong sort of food cultural background in that sense. But I guess sometimes it kind of can be a bit of a blessing in disguise, in my opinion, because I think once you sort of start to get exposed to the world of food and what's out there and the sort of the culinary experiences, it creates a great deal of excitement and but fairly modest, I would say. I remember when I first started my apprenticeship, so I started my apprenticeship in Bundaberg, and one of the biggest challenges I had was kind of, eating steak that was kind of rare or eating raw oysters and things like this, because these things were totally foreign to me. But, with a little bit of time and exposure, there's a whole sort of new world out there that was waiting to be discovered, and sort of, ever since then, I've been completely addicted.
What's been some of the really key sort of influences and sort of venues that have helped shape you as a chef?
I remember I moved to Brisbane to finish off the last 2 years of my apprenticeship, and I worked at a winery there. And I mean, Queensland's not really known for its wine, but we were working at a winery called Sirame Winery, and it was quite a good quite a good sort of local chef that was helming the kitchen, and it was a good team. It was a fairly big team. We would do sort of big covers, like we would do 180 covers, and it was a full sort of a la carte sort of style menu. And I guess that was my first sort of foray into, you know, really learning about the importance of, you know, produce and the quality of food and the actual ingredient itself. So that was a really, really good experience to sort of finish off my apprenticeship, and sort of really, you know, it was a really good trajectory to sort of really start understanding food and what it actually is, you know, the good from the bad. So that was definitely one. From there, I moved to Melbourne. So I moved to Melbourne in 2009. And at that time, Voudemont was kind of the best restaurant. Well, one of the best restaurants in Melbourne and also Australia. And I'd come down for a weekend just to sort of check out a few restaurants and eat out. And it was like a totally different world compared to Queensland. It was really eye-opening. From there, I got a job at Voudemont. And I guess that was another eye-opening experience. I think working, you know, with Shannon and the team then, that restaurant taught me a lot about obviously food, culture of food, the experience. So that would be another for sure.
There was a pretty big gap between you opening Amaru. What were you doing leading up to, you know, when you started thinking about having your own menu?
Oh, it's pretty funny, actually. So I worked at Voudemont for 4 years, and I just kind of, you know, I think sometimes you really know when it's your time to take the next leap or the next step in life. And I didn't really have any plans. I definitely wasn't in a financial position to sort of be opening my own restaurant or anything like that. But I just felt like my time there, and it was an amazing experience, but I just felt like it was sort of my time to take the next challenge. So after working at Vue, I actually had a couple of months off. And I was just trying to sort of, you know, collect my thoughts and sort of recalibrate myself and ask myself, you know, what's going to be the next step. And funnily enough, I was just helping out a friend of mine at the time, doing a couple of nights in a kitchen at a bowls club of all places. And yeah. And it was really weird. It was actually something I was just doing part-time. So I was planning to go overseas with my partner. So my wife's from Brazil, and we were planning a trip back to Brazil. And anyway, sort of one thing led to another, and then I ended up taking over a lease at this bowls club, and it was just an amazing experience, actually. So we had a few food bloggers and stuff that come in whilst I was there, and we were doing these sort of like small degustation menus that were really cheap. It was reasonably nice food. It was just a sort of a really strange contrast of nice food in a weird sort of place at that time. And it sort of really took off. So we were booked out for a few months in advance and whatnot. So we ended up negotiating a 1 year lease at this bowls club. And yeah, kind of from there, it really gave me it was almost like a proto sort of restaurant sort of thing, right? Because it's one thing to sort of manage your food cost and, you know, write a menu and do your ordering and run a kitchen side of things, but running the business side of things is completely different. So from there, I become a sole trader and I registered a business name, and I got this fantastic experience of what it actually does take to run a restaurant. And it was quite successful. So we did that for 1 year. I saved a little bit of money. I was quite tired, to be honest. Physically, I was quite tired at that time. We took 4 months off, so we ended up going to Brazil. We had a nice holiday. But during that time, it gave me a clear path, and it gave me the vision of what the next step was going to be, and that was to sort of try and establish my own place. And again, we started very small. It was a very, very small budget. During that 4 months, I created a sort of a business plan. We created a name, a concept, and I presented that to some family friends of mine, and they've been instrumental actually in sort of really helping me get a start. So we had a small pool of funds together, and actually the first day I arrived back in Australia, I had a short list of suburbs and venues and sites I was going to look at, and I actually found the site for Amaru on my first day back in Australia. So, look, it was small enough. It was, I guess, affordable enough, even though rent in Armadale's not the cheapest. But again, I guess, weighing up sort of what we wanted to offer and sort of, what the concept was going to be. And I guess our sort of, our vision, it all aligned quite well. So we spent a few weeks sort of negotiating the lease, and then, we were just straight into it. So that's how the ball kind of really got going. It just, everything came together really, really quickly from there. We engaged a designer. I started sort of recruiting a couple of guys. Again, we had a very, very small team initially. And then 5 months later, we were open and we were trading.
The pressures of small business are quite intense, but to add a layer onto that, you've got family that invested and entrusted in you as well. Were there pressures involved in that first year of where they were involved from a financial perspective? Absolutely.
Look, at the same time, there's always options. You always have options in life, and I think I knew from very early on that I didn't necessarily want to do a partnership with other investors, or I didn't really want to be a head chef co-owner sort of thing. I just think, I don't know. I just feel like inevitably sometimes these things, they always start off really good, but quite often they go sour. So I outlined from very early on that I was happy to wear all the risk and take the responsibility. But then, we could really create our own identity, and anything we wanted to do, it was always going to be dictated by us, by our vision. We didn't really necessarily have to answer to anybody else. And there's pros and cons with that as well, definitely. But ultimately, I guess, it's really starting to sort of work and pay dividends now, because 5-6 years later we're still in business. I guess when I look back now, I think Amaru has really turned into something almost probably a little bit better than I guess we thought it probably could have initially, especially during the first year. So that's been really rewarding, and that's that's something now that really, I guess, gives me inspiration to sort of definitely keep going, and it's put us in a position where we can really now start to sort of find ourselves and continue to sort of, again, really identify what we are and what we want to do, not only as a restaurant, but I guess as a business and a sort of brand going forward, if that makes sense.
Quality produce and producers are really at the heart of what you do. Do you have any stories of the connections that you've made with producers that you sort of highlight on the menu?
Look, there's so many producers that we do use. I think it's something now that's really more important than ever to talk about, I think, because when you come to a restaurant as a consumer, you sit down and, you experience, the service, the ambience of the restaurant, the food itself. But there's so much that goes into that experience behind the scenes, and the food alone, whether it's, your organic producers, or we've got like 3 different organic producers that we work with just for vegetables. We use 2 or 3 different sort of fish suppliers, and guys that sort of specialize in getting certain products. We use a couple of different guys that forage and grow things, like that sort of part of it is instrumental to what you really want to do. And it's, it's actually a really good part of the job is working with these people and continually speaking to them, and, and I guess, respecting their products that are the sort of coming in the doors, and doing them justice, and being able to serve that to your guest it's extraordinary.
Give us a sense of what you're doing there. If you could tell us a bit about your food and your approach, and maybe if there's a dish or 2 you can tell us about that exemplifies sort of where you're at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Look, first and foremost, we want the sort of food to do all the talking without having to sort of, we don't really do a lot of theatrics, or there's nothing really sort of smoking at the tables, or not there's anything wrong with that at all. I mean, that's there's a place for everything, I think. But what we really focus on, and what's really important for me is just distilling clarity of flavors and ingredients. That's always been a big thing, is really sort of identifying your palate as a chef, and articulating these flavors on the plate for the guest to sort of be able to enjoy. I think when you're putting food in your mouth and you're tasting these these flavors and combinations, and I think if your guest can't really understand that, and if they're not sort of getting that without you having to tell an elongated story or anything else, I don't know if it's so that we work really hard on that, obviously. I guess one dish we're doing at the moment is we've got this amazing sort of quail dish that we're doing, and we're using these Jurassic quails, and it's kind of like a 3-week process before we actually serve it. So we get them in, we dry age them for about 2 weeks, and we do a couple of different sort of processes with it. But I guess the end result is, you sort of, you're tasting, I guess, you're tasting something that's sort of a little bit different than I guess you would have in a sort of a lot of other restaurants that maybe sort of just get it in and serve it sort of fresh in that regard, like the different flavor profile from the aging, the brushing of the tare and whatnot through the aging process allows us to sort of really cook it very quickly, and the skin blisters and caramelizes, but the meat's still sort of just set, and kind of sort of that medium rare sort of flavor or temperature. And just all these little sort of processes is what we sort of really focus on to really highlight the ingredient. So that would be one for sure. And look, the overall sort of balance of the menu is something we really, really put a lot of effort into as well. I don't think you should ever go home from a restaurant hungry, especially if you're serving a tasting menu. I think it's your obligation to make sure it's really well balanced and it's satisfying, and it's you're fulfilling your guest. But I think there's nothing worse than going out for a tasting menu where you're absolutely bloated and you've just had so much food and it's all really rich and it's just unbalanced. And, I think you just kind of, you lose your appetite and, you can't metabolize throughout the dinner. So I think it's really important to think about all these little pieces of the puzzle that go together over the course of the dinner as well.
During the recent period of time, you also opened Auterra Wine Bar. Tell us a bit about that and what it's been like opening that venue in sort of such turbulent times.
It's been pretty tricky. So the site the site that we took over, it actually used to be a wine bar. It was this great little wine bar, and I always thought the venue itself, I would love to sort of do something with the venue. And then I guess, I noticed a for lease sign on the front window in November 2020. And I guess, at that time, we were still sort of navigating sort of COVID, and we're sort of coming out of the lockdown, and, so there's a lot of green pastures in sight. And then I actually found myself sort of needing another challenge as well. It's by that time, it was 5 years of just doing nothing else but, Amaru, and all my thoughts and everything to do with my sort of, life was entangled just in Amaru. And whilst that's good, and I think that's that's what it takes, but I actually needed just to do something else to also just sort of give myself a bit more invigoration as well, and another challenge. So anyway, we signed the lease, and look, we thought that we will do this wine, but it'll be a totally different business than Amaru. Obviously, we only offer a degustation menu. So we wanted to do something that was a nice contrast to that. We wanted to do something that was a lot more accessible. So it's wine bar, and it's like a snack bar as well. It's kind of like it's a little short menu of 15 different items. Most of the things are designed to be sort of eaten with the hands. And it's fun. It's kind of the sort of place that, if I had something like that in my area, I would visit there twice a fortnight, and so we spent a good sort of 6 months conceptualizing the idea, and then we had an architect and everything, and then we put a lot of effort and a lot of work into it, and I'm really proud of what we've achieved. But I guess with COVID still lingering and lockdowns, in and out of lockdowns, it's definitely been a challenge. But in saying that as well, I guess, it's something really positive that I think come out of this whole sort of COVID thing as well. I think, I was at the stage where I really needed another challenge and something to sort of just take my mind out of my day-to-day operations, so I can sort of then come back in a little bit fresher and look at things from a different perspective as well. So that's been really good. That's been a huge positive. But yeah, it has been a challenge, just, being open, not being open. I think we actually opened the first week of July in 2021. And in that same week, we got a lot of great reviews. We're in all the main sort of publications. And then it really kind of exploded. We actually had reservations full for close to 3 months. And then within that same week, we were plunged into lockdown 6. So that was kind of devastating, because I guess, for a new business, you really need to sort of capture as much as that immediate audience that you can. And that was hard. That was really hard. So it's been challenging. I guess it's also been challenging for the staff as well, to sort of be continually sort of upbeat and to really try and, I guess, continue to be positive and navigate through that. Because it's been and I guess that's a real testament to my team as well, because it's been extremely hard for them as well. You put a lot of energy and effort and, a lot of emotion goes into, the weeks that leading up to opening the restaurant. And it was just kind of stop-start. I think we've literally opened it like 3 times. So, in saying that, we've been open again now since November, and it's been really good to sort of just see a few months of trading and trying to really, I guess, sort of, really build it up to where we want it to be. But yeah, COVID hasn't helped our cause there, definitely. But look, I think like most things in life, you just got to keep sort of pressing on with that and keep moving forward. Like there's always going to be obstacles. But overall, I think it's a really, really good addition to the area, and it's a really, really good contrast for Amaru as well. And I think, now we have somewhere that, sort of guests can visit either before or after, if there's ever a sort of, tables that are sort of staying late and we're sort of, there's people waiting for a table, we can pop them over to Auterra, get them a glass of champagne. So it actually sort of builds on our experience that we can offer at Amaru as well, in a sense.
You've had the most amazing accolades and success and acknowledgement, and build this incredible restaurant of influence from very small beginnings. What do you love about what you do?
What I love about what I do is, I love people coming in and having a great time in the restaurant. We've built so many great relationships with our clientele, like seeing families that have sort of been dining with us continually. Now that we've got so many loyal guests and customers that have they've just. That's one part of it. I think when you're in hospitality, you've definitely got to sort of have a love for that. But also building a team. We've always had a really good staff retention at Amaru. Building a team and a culture, and that's also another rewarding part. I think culture. I think is probably fundamentally, it's probably one of the most important things in a business, but a restaurant definitely. It's not just one person. It's not just me running the show here. It's not, restaurants, it's really about the amalgamation of the staff and the passion and everything that sort of goes into it.
Well, Clinton, it's absolutely extraordinary what you've built there, and no doubt we're going to see much more from you as well as in the years to come. We've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear just a little bit of your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.